Episode 5 opens with an amusing gag where Caesar's name replaces Ashur's name in the title cards. This, Ashur's reaction to his arrival in episode 4, Caesar commanding Ashur to clean up the Appian Way in episode 2, and everything we know about him from War of the Damned communicates that this man is going to be making a few changes around here, and Ashur is probably not going to like them. Ashur speaks with Caesar in private and proudly informs him that he has secured position in the upcoming games of the Ludi Apollinaries. I am not certain why Ashur is so eager to tell Caesar about his recent achievement, because whilst, yes, it is good that Ashur, as a Lannister, has been permitted to fight his men in the games, this would usually be seen as a given. Ashur has not been granted an important position, nor is he suddenly being treated as an equal to Opita and Proculus, which means Caesar would presumably hear this and would be like, oh, well done, you're doing your job. But then Caesar asks Ashur if he was rewarded with such an impressive bounty for rescuing Gabinius's wife and daughter from the swashbuckling horde. And Ashur is confused as to how Caesar knows about this.
Did you truly hold the gods would smile upon one as base as you?
And Caesar reveals that he hired the pirates.
I'm so frustrated right now.
And here's where the sudden and implausible appearance of a rambunctious horde of rum-drinking scallywags in the prior episode becomes even less plausible. It turns out that these men were not pirates. This was Crassus and Caesar conducting a false flag attack. Caesar's own men were dressed up as pirates so as to create panic and hopefully prompt Gabinius to convince Pompey to come and deal with the actual pirates, thus breaking his stalemate with Crassus outside the gates of Rome. This part makes an amount of sense. If Caesar could guarantee that Gabinius would be heavily personally invested in quelling the pirates, then he would obviously ask Pompey for help, which is something that would potentially benefit Caesar and Crassus if Pompey accepts. Caesar sent the fake pirates to cause some mayhem and abduct Viridia or Cassutia. He was apparently not specific as to which one they should kidnap. And he also sent the letter to Ashur instructing him to go into Capua to retrieve his luggage in advance of his arrival, which somewhat plugs the rather substantial coincidence of Ashur happening to be in Capua at the exact moment when the pirates enacted their dastardly scheme. Caesar then set a message upon the breeze that some Egyptian linen was going to be at the Egyptian linen shop later that day. Opita was directly contacted by Caesar, and we later learn that he was in on the whole plan, but rather confusingly he did not question why Caesar or Crassus would do such a thing, and he somehow didn't realize that this plan involved murder and kidnapping.
That's your plan.
Opita then told Cassutia about the Egyptian linen, Cassutia told Viridia about it, and both ladies headed into town. Caesar was presumably also responsible for the actual shipment of Egyptian linen, because if he wasn't, then this becomes even more insane than it already is. The reason Crassus and Caesar did this is because they wanted Ashur to swoop in and save the day, thus gaining the favor of Gabinius. They were apparently hoping that Ashur would have been able to ingratiate himself with Gabinius without requiring the surprise intervention of secret plot pirates, but because Ashur failed, what was once unthinkable became necessity, and what began as any other trip to the Egyptian linen shop became yo-ho fiddle-dee-dee, it's a surprise pirate's life for me. Crassus and Caesar's ultimate goal here is apparently for Gabinius to be swayed from his allegiance to Pompey in favor of Crassus. This is in fact why Caesar is now here in Capua, to succeed where Ashur failed. This means it is possible that the whole reason Ashur was given the former House of Batiatus was specifically so that he could gain favor with Gabinius, which would potentially help Crassus subvert Pompey, and this is an idea that I like because it means Ashur is again being used as a tool of others, but the execution is all over the fucking place. Now I need to address the execution being all over the fucking place, beginning with a few questions that I can't answer. Is Caesar confident enough in Ashur's fighting skill that he believes Ashur could kill the army of fake pirates and save the day? Well, in this alternate timeline, Ashur did serve Crassus during the events of War of the Damned, and so I can confirm with absolute certainty that the answer is a solid maybe. But I can't do any better than that because I have no fucking idea what Ashur did during the alternate timeline version of War of the Damned. What did Caesar actually tell his men to do? Did he tell them to murder the wife of the Aedile and some guards, but to be very, very careful not to kill anyone else? Or did he just let rip with the proverbial Beyblade of secret murder pirates in a populated area and wait to see who is left standing? Did his men believe they would survive? If so, why? Was the plan to sneak into Capua, kill a couple of Roman noblewomen, abduct Viridia, and sail off into the sunset with a yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum? And once they had accomplished this, what would they do next? If all goes to plan, they're gonna wait for Pompey to attack the actual pirates, all the while assuming that no one from Capua followed them in an attempt to rescue Viridia? I can't answer any of this because the plausibility of the hypothetical question as to what would happen if the plan actually worked is not accounted for by the show. Furthermore, if any one of these fake pirates is injured instead of killed, or potentially realizes that he has been set up and is obviously going to die, and he then spills the beans as to who he is and what he is doing, then Gabinius will learn that Marcus fucking Crassus ordered the assassination of Gabinius's own wife, as well as the wife of the Aedile, and tried to abduct Gabinius's daughter, which would almost certainly cause a civil war because, as we have been told multiple times, Gabinius is the one man desperately trying to make peace between Crassus and Pompey. Crassus's plan is presented as though he can't lose. If Ashur succeeds, then he gains favor with Gabinius, and if Ashur fails, then they still have power over Gabinius because they have his daughter. But if Caesar's involvement in this insane plan is revealed for any reason, either through Opiter, Ashur, or any one of the pirates themselves, we now have a civil war. Which means Marcus Crassus is now retarded.
You done fucked up now!
Whilst Caesar sending Ashur into Capua plugs the coincidence of Ashur being at the right place at the right time, it creates another coincidence.
Fuck!
If Ashur was specifically instructed to go into Capua at that time, does this mean the fake pirates were also instructed to spring the trap at precisely 11:03 in the morning? The fake pirates were presumably not aware of Ashur's involvement, which means they can't have waited until he was in position before they pillaged Viridia. And given that this all happened rather quickly, this means this is still very much a lucky coincidence, albeit less of a coincidence than previously thought. Next question. How could Caesar possibly know which path Ashur would take to retrieve the luggage? Okay, if he has detailed knowledge of Capua, then he may know where Ashur's villa is, and he may know where the Egyptian linen shop is, so he could direct Ashur to pick up the luggage just around the corner from the Egyptian linen shop, which is, I think, what we are expected to believe is what happened. But this falls apart immediately if Ashur decides to go in the other direction after collecting the luggage because he wants to buy a banana or some shit. Simply put, if Ashur does not return with the luggage via the Egyptian linen shop, then the entire plan falls apart. Now, regarding Casutia and Viridia being in Capua. As we learn later, Opiter was at least partially in on this dastardly scheme, and so he was likely instructed by Caesar to invite Casutia over for some muff diving, so that he can then let slip that there are Egyptian linens arriving the following day. However, this seems to rely entirely upon Caesar knowing that the only fucking thing that would cause Viridia to leave the house was Egyptian linen. Caesar has never met Viridia, which means this was a random stab in the dark. So I guess if he had instead acquired a shipment of Sainsbury's Taste the Difference pork sausages, Casutia would have been like, hey Viridia, guess what? There's going to be some really awesome sausages arriving tomorrow. And Viridia would then be like, nah, sorry, I still haven't got over my old one. And so the plan cannot continue. Because if Viridia is not present, then Ashur has quite literally zero reason to intervene. So that's all the ways in which this insane plan could go wrong. Now let's address the prospect of the insane plan going wrong, because this plan is fucking nuts, and we have 5 major failure points, and if any one goes wrong, then everything goes wrong. The first way this could go wrong is if Ashur and the pirates do not cross paths, which could happen for really any reason. He took an unexpected route, he wanted a banana, either party was delayed, the pirates attacked too early, news of the Egyptian linen never made it to Kasutia, take your pick. The second way this could go wrong is if Ashur shows up as intended but is unable to defeat the pirates and he is killed. If this happens, Ashur, and by extension Crassus, will not earn favor with Gabinius because the pirates will successfully abduct his daughter, and Crassus will lose the chess piece he has placed in Capua. The third and fourth ways this could go wrong is if Kasutia is abducted and Viridia is killed, or if Viridia is abducted and Kasutia is killed. If either of these happen, Ashur will earn no favor as above, but Gabinius will lose his fucking mind and will likely demand that either Pompey or Crassus come and deal with the land pirates immediately. If Pompey agrees, then this would work out in Crassus's favor, but it is just as likely that he would refuse due to his current predicament. And the fifth way this could go wrong is if anyone learns who these fake pirates are and what they are doing. Regardless of who kidnaps who lives, who dies, setting all of that aside, the worst possible outcome would be for Gabinius to learn that Crassus and Caesar were behind the attempted kidnapping of his daughter and the attempted murder of his wife, which would have serious political consequences for them and would likely result in civil war, assassination attempts, and their untimely deaths. In summary, this plan is fucking nuts. It commits the unforgivable sin of turning Crassus into a moron, and the intended outcome of Ashur gaining favor with Gabinius is so astronomically unlikely that it still happened due to random chance, even though the attack itself and Ashur's presence were both premeditated. And as ridiculous as it was, the story would have been stronger had they in fact just been random plot pirates who wanted to do some pillaging. The reason we learn the truth about the pirates is because Caesar decides to explain everything to Ashur, and I cannot begin to imagine why he would ever do this. The implied reason is that this is a power play. Everything Caesar does in this episode is to fuck with Ashur by asserting his power over him, and this is no different. He even frames the dialogue as, "You think the gods did this? Well, actually it was me," positioning himself as Ashur's god. However, there is absolutely no practical reason to tell Ashur anything. Far better to keep him in the dark as an unwitting tool of Crassus than to reveal the truth, because the truth brings with it some serious risks. Aside from Ashur becoming disillusioned with Crassus for trying to kill his girlfriend and nearly killing him, he could also reveal what happened to Gabinius. And sure, Gabinius would probably not believe him, because Ashur being like, "Hey man, so remember those land pirates? Well, actually that was a false flag attack orchestrated by the richest man in the Republic." Gabinius would likely reply, "Well, I don't know about that. That sounds like the plot of a bad TV show from 2025. But regardless, the risk is greater than zero. Gabinius could connect the dots that Crassus is his political enemy. Pirates typically do not attack inland cities. His family being abducted could potentially help Crassus subvert Pompey. And Crassus's right-hand man has just shown up in Capua. And Gabinius may at the very least become suspicious. Meanwhile, Aquileia trains 1v3 with Chorus, Celadus, and Tarchon, because if episode 4 had not communicated this by now, Aquileia is the best. And as Caesar and his wife Cornelia watch the gladiators training, Caesar is like, a woman. Alright, well, that's mildly funny. Which is an interesting reaction given that this is unprecedented and is treated by every other character as somewhere between a perversion and the funniest fucking thing they have ever seen. Now armed with the knowledge that Ash's champion is a diversity hire and so is likely not qualified for the job, he decides to take advantage of his current presence in Capua to fuck around with Ashur and ensure that Aquileia fails. So, Ashur and Caesar visit Gabinius. Caesar tells Gabinius that Crassus wishes to form a political connection with him. Caesar's goal here is for Pompey to be lured away from Rome, and because the land pirates didn't do the job, he believes that if Gabinius were to appear to suddenly be aligned with Caesar, this would make Pompey be like, excuse me, what the fuck? And he would personally head to Capua to find out what is going on. This idea makes sense, but relies entirely on Pompey placing immense value in the loyalty of Gabinius, who, whilst important, he's just one of many senators, to the point where he will personally uproot his army and leave Rome to potentially be occupied by Crassus. Gabinius, however, likes this idea, and he agrees to Caesar's suggestion that the two of them jointly present the games of the Ludi Apollinaries. In return, Caesar asks that Crassus's champion, meaning Ashur's champion, meaning Aquileia, be elevated to the position of primus. This suggests that Aquileia herself is being elevated, not the fight between Aquileia and the brothers Ferox, which means Aquileia is being moved to a different fight. This was my understanding, given the motives and reactions of everyone in this scene. Ashur is clearly worried, like, okay, no, Aquileia is gonna fucking die in the Primus, because in spite of being the best, she is also not the best. And Caesar is obviously doing this because he wants Aquileia to die, as this will embarrass Ashur. But then Ashur says that the crowd will want to see a rematch against the brothers Ferox, which means his understanding is that the fight itself is being moved to the Primus, which means he isn't worried that she will die. He is purely concerned by the fact that the stakes are now higher because the fight will have higher billing. Ashur returns to the Ludus and informs his gladiators that, thanks to Caesar, they have secured the Primus. Tarchon is still like, Aquileia hasn't earned anything, and although the show portrays Tarchon as this whiny, impetuous, and jealous child, he is fucking right. Which means the writers are presenting a correct observation through a character we are meant to believe is wrong, which functions as the writers trying to gaslight the audience. Tarchon then senses an opportunity, and he gives a speech to his fellow gladiators by telling them that they are warriors destined for blood and glory.
Those who bear the mark of the Brotherhood do not stand men, fucking women! We stand gladiators!
He then approaches Aquileia, gives her a piece of bread, and tells her to claim victory, prompting the other gladiators to follow his example. This is presented as though this is the scene where the gladiators finally accept Aquileia as one of them. And with two exceptions, this is exactly what this scene is. The exceptions are Tarchon and Erato, because Erato is like, what the fuck are you doing? And Tarchon reveals that he is playing the long game. He wants her to succeed so that he can defeat her at a later date and become the champion himself. Tarchon pretending to be supportive of Aquileia makes partial sense, because he could just as easily continue abusing her in the hope that she dies the moment she steps into the arena, but the larger problem is that this facade is taken at face value by the other gladiators, and they all decide to give her some bread and finally accept her as a brother and or sister. So, let's consider why the gladiators would accept her. Reason 1. Her success will benefit them because it will lead to placement in further games. Reason 2. There isn't a reason 2, please refer to reason 1. Now on to the reasons why these gladiators would not accept her. Reason 1. She is the newest gladiator in the Ludus and she is at the bottom of the pecking order. Reason 2. She is a woman and she does not belong here. Reason 3. She is not as strong as they are and she is not as good at fighting as they are, or at least that was true until episode 4 when she got roided on positive thinking. Reason 4. She killed a fellow gladiator by ripping his nuts off. Reason 5. She was not punished at all for killing a fellow gladiator by ripping his nuts off. Reason 6. She received the Mark of the Brotherhood without passing the final test. Reason 7. She was chosen as the champion of the house, thus jumping the queue. And reason 8. Not only has she been chosen to fight, but she will be fighting in the Primus, which is the third thing she has not fucking earned.
Bullshit.
Whilst the gladiators accepting her does not play a part in this episode, I must assume that going forwards, this drama is resolved. And all of the gladiators, apart from Tarchon and Erato, are suddenly cool with her because they have realized that she is in fact the best. Meanwhile, Ashur and Hilara go to the bedroom and they are surprised to find that Cornelia is boinking Messier. Cornelia was complaining earlier about the stench of the house. She clearly thinks Ashur is subhuman, and yet she has decided to get naked and frolic in his bed.
Why would you do that?
Caesar is like, well, sorry, buddy, but while we're here, we are going to have sex with everything. And he beats up Ashur and tells him not to mistake them for equals. Caesar then bends Hilara over and makes Ashur watch, and this kind of thing has been done before in the original show, including by Ashur himself. And it would usually be horrifying, but the impact is severely lessened because neither Ashur nor Hilara are sympathetic in any way. Ashur is a rapist and a murderer whose concern for others is non-existent beyond how they can benefit him, whilst Hilara is an abusive, obsessive, paranoid, deluded, and spiteful woman who loves Ashur for reasons that I can't quite work out. Yes, they both have elements of humanizing characterization, and yes, Caesar and Cornelia are abusing them by using Ashur's house for their own pleasure, but Ashur, at least, has done the same and worse to others. So the show insisting that Ashur is the protagonist that we must root for, whilst Caesar is the evil baddie getting in his way, is again gaslighting. Unless, I guess, we are in the alternate universe where Ashur didn't have a man executed to avoid a gambling debt, didn't rape multiple people, didn't murder multiple people as a means of interrogation, didn't offer up his friend to be sodomized and later blind and kill him, and didn't crucify multiple innocent people under Glaber's command. Oh boo fucking who, Caesar was mean to Ashur. I fucking hope he was, because Ashur deserves this and more. I do feel some sympathy for Hilara because she is being used by Caesar to hurt Ashur, but this is entirely because this is uncomfortable to watch, rather than as a result of any kind of characterization she has received. Now we come to the sex party, which means, Tinky Winky, it's that time again, you should be well rehearsed by now. During the sex party, we get a rapid-fire series of dialogue exchanges, some of which are plot-relevant, whilst some, I am guessing, are setups for later payoffs. Gabinius, Casutia, and Viridia show up, and because Viridia's single character trait is that she is really nice to Ashur, she asks about the bruises on his face that are shaped suspiciously like Caesar's foot, but Ashur declines to reveal the truth because he doesn't want to piss off Crassus. I also need to highlight that Ashur knows that Caesar was behind the pirate attack, and yet he has declined to reveal this information, presumably because he can't prove it, although given how frequently we are told that he cares for Viridia, this simply has to pop up again later in the show. Caesar nearly killed Viridia, and Ashur cannot let that slide. Casutia, meanwhile, has not revised her opinion on Ashur following Ashur saving her daughter's life. She instead only declares thanks for Chorus and seems to believe Chorus saved everyone, including Ashur, which she must know is false, because Viridia must have told her that Ashur defended her against like 10 pirates. So I don't know if Casutia is just an idiot or if this hasn't been written well enough to convince me otherwise. We then get a brief exchange between Messia and Hilara as they openly complain about how they are being mistreated by Caesar, because this is just a thing that a slave can do in the middle of a party surrounded by Romans. But don't worry, no one notices, and then Caesar addresses the partygoers. And it is at this point that I realized that the show hasn't actually explained who Caesar is. And this may sound silly, like, well, obviously he's Julius Caesar, but it is important to understand who he is at this point in his life. What has he done? What power does he have? What does he want? None of which have been clarified yet, and so we are forced to draw on his portrayal in War of the Damned to get any answers. He is an ally of Crassus, he wants to be powerful, and he doesn't like Ashur. I can't be any more specific, however, because the show hasn't given me anything else to work with. Anyway, Caesar introduces the houses of Proculus and Opita as they present their gladiators, before Ashur is given the opportunity to do the same. Ashur presents his champion, and the crowd starts laughing uncontrollably because they don't yet understand how awesome she is. Gabinius, however, is not amused. He is a sensible traditionalist who likes traditional gladiator matches. He didn't like the gnomes pissing on Logas, and he doesn't like this absurd plan to dress a woman up like a gladiator and pretend that she is one.
Sticking feathers up your butt does not make you a chicken.
He knows that Ashur is going to be like, "Behold, woman!" and then her head will swiftly be parted from fucking shoulders, and both Ashur and Gabinius will look like idiots. However, Gabinius recognizes that he can't remove Achillea from the Primus now that expectations have been set, but he tells Ashur that when she dies, the two of them will part ways. He has no desire to befriend Ashur, and he simply wants this idiotic joke to end. And at this point, I know exactly how Gabinius feels. Ashur then reveals that he knows that Gabinius was testing him back in episode 2 when he was told about the plan to dispatch Pompey to deal with the pirates, and Ashur believes he has passed whatever this test was, as he has not communicated this information to either Crassus or Caesar. Gabinius asks why Ashur did not inform Crassus, if he was motivated by a desire for peace between Crassus and Pompey, or if he simply wants to elevate himself. And Ashur replies,
"The two need not stand
in conflict.
And this honesty and shrewd maneuvering proves enough for Gabinius to change his tact. He tells Ashur that he will forgive the idiotic decision to put a woman in the Primus, and that they will move towards a common goal. Meanwhile, Opita corners Chorus because the two haven't spoken since they shared a bath in episode 4, which was about a week ago. He is pissed off that Chorus concealed the female nature of Ashur's champion, and he doesn't like that he pressed for position in the games so that Ashur could present a woman in the arena, because this makes him look like a useful idiot. Chorus, however, reasonably defends this deception, as Opita is Ashur's rival, and so he couldn't risk revealing anything that could compromise the house. Naturally, Opita then starts jacking him off, and who could possibly take notice of this but Proculus, who is like, why is my rival jacking off the doctori of my other rival? And yeah, I'm pretty certain this will play into something later. After Opita has washed his hands, or perhaps not, I don't know how this man operates, Caesar has a chat with him, and it is here that we learn that Opita was in on the pirate attack from episode 4. Opita is extremely pissed off that his conspiring with Caesar led to the death of the Aedile's wife. In fact, Opita was somehow under the impression that no one would get hurt, which means that Opita is retarded because he apparently thought that you could just hire plot pirates and have them not kill anyone during their rampage. The reason why Opita did this is because Caesar paid him to make sure the tale of the Egyptian linen reached Casutia and Viridia, but this is an insufficient explanation. Opita is close friends with Casutia. He seems to be a relatively nice guy who just wants life to be a party. He is in many ways similar to Gaia from Gods of the Arena, but he is also apparently willing to drop his friend and her daughter into the direct path of rampaging land pirates. But of course, Opita thought no one would get hurt, which really just confirms that he is incredibly gullible. Caesar tells him that he is disappointed that Opita regrets his part in this plan, and suggests that Opita might find himself abducted by land pirates unless he toes the line. Ashur then presents Calidus and Tarchon for an exhibition match, after which Tarchon sees his favourite prostitute Elata pleasing a Roman, and he's like, hold on a tick, this is my second character trait. And he basically steals a prostitute from a wealthy Roman by lying to him so that he can have sex with her instead. Tarchon's other character trait is that he is brash and impulsive, so this does line up. But even so, this is remarkably risky because if literally anyone walks past, then he will be discovered, because he is not meant to be in a side room sexing his girlfriend. Following the sex party, Calidus returns to his cell and finds Achelia waiting for him. The reason she is here is because he is apparently a very experienced gladiator, and he is also the only guy who has been nice to her the whole time, and she has come seeking advice. In a rare moment of modesty, Achelia tells him that she is nervous and is worried that she is fated to die. He replies that the odds are not in her favour. However, the brothers Ferox will likely underestimate her because she is a woman, and so there is a chance that she will survive. Achelia then decides to have sex with Calidus because, as she says, he is the least offensive man in the Ludus. And he decides to willingly participate, even though he previously cautioned his son against having sex prior to a fight.
Doctori warned against placing hands upon you.
I will slap you in the teeth.
No, you fuck! The reason the story gave for not touching Achelia is that she will rip your nuts off and get away with it. Chorus being like, also, please don't touch her or you will be disciplined, shouldn't enter their fucking minds. Anyway, we then jump forward to the games of the Ludo Apollinaries. Every Roman noble we have met so far is in the Pulvinus. Ashur has been invited to join them for the first time, and Viridia even makes a surprise appearance. Hilara is becoming increasingly pissed off with Ashur's obvious feelings for Viridia, and my guess is that Hilara will try to kill her at some point so that she can have Ashur all to herself. Gabinius then introduces the next fight, Tarchon and Calidus versus two of Proculus's gladiators. There is definitely tension during this fight, because Tarchon and Calidus are not on the same page. Tarchon does not listen to his father, and Calidus just broke his own rule of not motorboating before a fight. This means we have reason to believe that they will not be fighting at maximum efficiency, nor will they be fighting as one. Calidus could absolutely die here, although I think it is unlikely that Tarchon will, as his plot is clearly not finished. So, Tarchon attacks alone and does not heed his father's instructions. Calidus consequently gets blapped because Tarchon is not covering him. Calidus eventually kills one opponent and then stands there like a fucking plank.
Behind you!
You goddamn moron.
Forcing Tarchon to rescue his father, and they stand victorious. But now the time has come for the Primus, and Caesar introduces the fighters.
Achillea, goddess of death!
The crowd does not cheer because their eyes have not yet been opened as to how awesome she is. The people of Capua are wrong, don't you know, because they hold the absolutely reasonable view that women cannot be gladiators, nor will a fight between a woman and any number of men of any size be even remotely entertaining. Speaking of men of any size, it's time to introduce her opponent.
I present to you, Ammonius Mamillo!
The smile is immediately wiped off Ash's face. Achillea shits herself. The brothers Ferox are like, what the fuck is this? Chorus realizes Achillea's odds of survival have gone from poor to subterranean. She is now going to die. Before I continue, this is a subversion of the like we have seen multiple times before in the original show. The best in execution is the fight between Spartacus and Varro in episode 10 of Blood and Sand. The entire episode is built on the idea that Spartacus and Crixus will face each other in an exhibition match, and multiple character narratives relate specifically to this, such as Crixus wishing to use the opportunity to reclaim his title from Spartacus. Then the rug is pulled out at the last moment, and it is revealed, for reasons that I'm not going to go into now, that Varro will be fighting instead of Crixus, and we all know what happened next. This misdirection is not a cheap gimmick that lets the writers be like, hey, guess what? The surprise, the thing that I said isn't what I led you to believe. I've tricked you, haha. The writers in the original show used this misdirection to enhance one of the most effective emotional payoffs I have ever seen, and to build multiple characters by showing how this subversion affects them both before and after the payoff. Now, regarding this misdirection in House of Ashur. The writers clearly want the audience to believe that Achillea will be fighting the brothers Ferox in the Primus, and there are multiple suggestions throughout the episode that this is going to happen.
Let us stand reflection of the brothers Ferox.
Contest revisited with the brothers Ferox would see flames further ignited.
The brothers Ferox. Reality fails to rise to imagined legend.
How gauge you odds at survival?
Against the brothers Ferox.
Your time approaches. Prepare yourself.
For death.
But the problem is that all of this reiteration that the Primus fight will be Achillea versus the brothers Ferox takes place after the writers tip their hand. Caesar told Gabinius that he wanted Achillea to be elevated to the Primus, and thanks to the specific words he uses, it is immediately pretty obvious that Achillea is not going to be fighting the brothers Ferox. She is going to be fighting against whoever usually fights in the Primus, which means she is going to be fighting Ammonius. The way to fix this would be for Caesar to be explicit that he wants the fight between Achillea and the brothers Ferox to be elevated to the Primus, and later, when it is revealed that she is to face Ammonius, we can infer that Caesar made a backroom arrangement with Gabinius to fuck over Ashur. Unfortunately, however, the writers overplayed their hand through poorly concealing Caesar's intentions. So now that we have been thoroughly subverted, what does this actually mean? Achillea has spent her entire time in Ashur's Ludus preparing to face the brothers Ferox. All of the training and advice that she has received has been specifically gearing her up to defeat 3 halflings, not the biggest, baddest gladiator in Capua. We can confirm that Ammonius is not the champion of Capua, because if he was, then he would have been introduced using that title in episode 1. I don't actually know if there is a champion of Capua. It doesn't appear so, because this is the arena being used, and Ammonius appears to be the best fighter presented. He also riles up the crowd like no other, and Ashur specifically said that he wanted a gladiator of his own to rival Ammonius, which means even if he is not technically the champion of Capua, unless there is some other Lanista in Capua with better gladiators who are off doing other games in a different arena somewhere, the show has told us that Ammonius is the best gladiator in Capua. In the context of a Spartacus TV show, could I accept a woman winning a fight against a man? Absolutely. This needs some justification because on an even playing field, the man would almost always defeat the woman, but the opposite could certainly happen, particularly once weapons are involved. Could I accept a woman winning a fight against the brothers Ferox? Absolutely. In fact, this is what I thought the season was building towards, given how much screen time the brothers Ferox have received. Could I accept a woman winning a fight against a male gladiator? Yes. This is where I am almost certainly more generous than many other viewers and quite possibly many of you watching this video. I maintain that it is possible to portray Achilea winning a 1v1 against a male gladiator and for it to not feel like utter bullshit. Had she trained all season and finally won her first fight in the finale after Ashur had lost all hope in her ever succeeding, and had this fight contained some mitigating circumstances that allowed her to win, then I would have absolutely no problem with this. However, could I accept a woman winning a fight against the best gladiator in Capua?
Please don't make me laugh.
Gladiators are already far more skilled than the average man, as has been shown in all prior seasons, so a woman receiving a big fat dose of gladiator training and becoming a Giga Chad-S is coherent, but the problem is that we already know Ammonius's reputation. He is the champion of Capua in all but name, which means Achilea does not stand a fucking chance. So what possible wiggle room do we have to work with? I can think of two potential points of leverage for the writers to exploit. Ammonius is not simply trying to kill her as quickly as possible, because his job is to entertain the crowd, not kill his opponent. This is also seen in Blood and Sand episode 3 when Crixus faces Spartacus, and although these fights almost always end in death, which is something that Blood and Sand mostly avoided, and so also avoided prompting the audience to question how there can possibly be enough gladiators in Capua when one dies in almost every fight, death is not the inevitable outcome here. Theoretically, if she puts on a good show, Achilea could lose but be spared. The second factor is that Ammonius will underestimate her because she is a woman, which is something that would absolutely happen, but does not suddenly mean that Achilea stands a chance against the de facto champion of Capua. And the final point I want to make before I reveal what happens is that although the decision to alter the fight was apparently made by Gabinius, all of this is Caesar's doing. So, what exactly is Caesar doing and what outcome would he expect? Caesar obviously wants this to be a high-profile failure for Ashur that further damages his reputation. Achilea dying in the Primus is the obvious and expected outcome, which means Caesar is going out of his way to make Ashur look bad, probably with the intention of having Crassus cut him loose for good. The small problem here is that Ashur's failure is Crassus's failure, which means Ashur could simply write a letter to Crassus, as he does frequently, telling him that Caesar showed up and started sabotaging his financial investment in the Ludus by rigging fights and having its gladiators killed in high-profile games that they were not even remotely prepared for. Maybe Caesar would still do this, but the risk of him taking such an action is not addressed by the show. And at this point, I doubt that Crassus will make an appearance, which means the writers are probably never going to address it. So with that all out of the way, what actually happens? Well, as expected, Achilea fucking loses. She hits Ammonius fast and hard and he lets her press her advantage before disarming her of one of her swords. He physically overpowers her incredibly easily, sliding her all the way across the arena before she jumps over his shield to avoid getting squashed. Ammonius then disarms her of her remaining sword and launches her into the wall before throwing her around like a rag doll. The crowd demands death, and as Ammonius approaches her ready to deliver the killing blow, Achilea has a spooky vision, seeing presumably her sister as a child. Maybe I am wrong here, but honestly I can't tell you because we are halfway through the season and we still know nothing about this character. But anyway, she harnesses the power of dead relatives to get a second wind, but continues to be dominated by Ammonius. She is severely injured when his sword embeds itself in her hand, which partially cuts it in half. He is about to execute her, but she rolls out of the way, manages to get behind him before he realizes what has happened. She grabs her sword with her functional hand, grabs Ammonius with her non-functional hand, And, well, I mean, we all know where that sword is going.
Up his ass.
This has now become a recurring pattern with Aquilia. Her opponents will insult her in some way, and she will prove how awesome she is and will then repeat their insult back at them.
Move. Let's see life fucking forfeit.
Move and see his fucking life forfeit.
Shall I treat her as opponent or something of delicate persuasion?
A question I was of mind to pose towards you.
I shall fuck salted words from mouth.
Do you borrow cock to do so?
The one at last finds her place on her back with legs spread.
Man at last finds his place. Legs spread, absent cock.
You assume proper place for weakened animal.
Proper place for weakened animal.
And here, Ammonius was telling her he was going to fuck her corpse, and she ultimately wins the fight by fucking him with a sword, thus turning him into a corpse. Aquilia doesn't really seem to have any kind of personality of her own. She just hears things, proves people wrong, and then repeats their own lines back at them. Whilst I do still maintain that the character was not a girl boss Mary Sue buzzword who gives a fuck, the show has now managed to fully sway me to the other side. Yes, she works hard. Yes, she suffers, and yes, this was by no means easy, but every victory she has achieved has been through a combination of luck and being given things she has not earned. Not only did this episode not recognize that Aquilia beating Tarquin Arato and Ephesius in episode 4 was extremely lucky, but we then dial this up even further by having her defeat Ammonius through being extremely lucky. She doesn't trick her opponents, she doesn't outmatch them through being faster or more skilled, or by taking advantage of her nimble womanly form as was described in episode 3. She merely waited for her opponents to become momentarily brain dead before clawing an undeserved victory from the hands of certain death. But anyway, she's fucking done it. The crowd chants her name. Oh my god, she's just like Spartacus, you guys. And Aquilia then passes out due to blood loss, and we cut to the credits. What the fuck did I just watch? Where episode 4 convinced me that the writers were not interested in being at all realistic with the idea of a woman fighting in the arena, episode 5 is when the show jumps the shark and then comes back to sodomize it with a gladius. In 2 episodes, Aquilia has gone from getting the shit kicked out of her by every other gladiator in the Ludus to becoming the de facto champion of Capua.
Mission accomplished.
If for some reason you desperately want to tell a story where a woman becomes the champion of Capua, then you can do that, but you have to do so much work to believably achieve this payoff. Like, I don't know, 3 seasons of build-up in which she somehow climbs the ranks and becomes a legend in her own right, fighting against little people and other women, and very occasionally men, before she is pitted against someone truly formidable. Episode 5 of House of Ashur is in many ways similar to Episode 5 of Blood and Sand, in that it features the house gearing up for a very important fight that ends in an unexpected victory. But as much as the writers want so fucking desperately for Aquilia to be Spartacus, she is not. Before becoming champion, Spartacus was already shown to be far more competent than Aquilia was, largely because he was obviously much stronger than her and he had military training, and so he could at least somewhat hold his own against people like Crixus and Enemaeus. Additionally, the means by which he becomes champion are through cooperation with Crixus, allowing him to defeat a man who could not be defeated. What House of Ashur has just done is taken a somewhat trained Spartacus and had him single-handedly defeat the living legend that was Theocles. And because back in 2010 the writers were smart enough to understand why you should not do such a thing, they added extra layers to make this more believable, which resulted in one of the best episodes of the original show. House of Ashur, meanwhile, simultaneously acknowledges the innate biological differences between men and women, but also says actually no, and has Aquilia just defeat the best gladiator in Capua, which is absolutely fucking ridiculous. So now I must ask, will the injury to her hand have any consequences whatsoever? We have seen hand injuries cause gladiators to adjust their fighting styles, so is that what will happen here? More importantly, however, will the show acknowledge that she keeps winning because she is astronomically lucky? Given how the past 3 episodes have skirted addressing any consequences for Achelia, my guess is that she is now the best, and everyone knows she is the best, and she will continue to be the best. What else am I supposed to take from this episode? The writers introduced Achelia in episode 1 and then fucking sprinted through episodes 2 through 5 in order to get her to their desired point of being the best. This means that there are apparently no real differences between men and women. A sufficiently skilled woman can absolutely defeat a de facto champion in the arena. And I don't want to lean on real-world history because I don't care about accuracy, and this is historical fiction, which means you can do pretty much whatever you want. But if we look at the real history of gladiators, whilst women did fight in the arena, this was exceptionally rare, and they only ever fought each other. There is not a shred of evidence that a woman ever so much as fought a man in the arena, let alone defeated him. And the reason why there is no evidence for this happening is because that is a fucking pipe dream that would never happen for so many reasons that I am not going to bother listing them. It seems pretty obvious to me that the way you should go about writing a story like this would be to draw on the actual history, and have Ashur break from tradition by introducing a female gladiator, by having her fight against another female gladiator, and he could then build a reputation as the guy who has essentially ownership of his own league of female gladiators. But apparently the writers didn't want to do that, because if they did, then she couldn't become the champion of Capua in 5 fucking episodes. Anyway, because this is historical fiction, you can write things that didn't actually happen, provided you make a convincing argument as to why they could have happened. A Lannister could have found a strong brown woman and decided, that might be a neat idea, let's throw her in the arena and see what happens. Another Lannister could find 3 halflings and do the exact same thing. These 2 Lannisters could have pitted their party tricks against each other, and the woman could have stood victorious. That is what I thought the show was doing. That's what the show was set up to do. But actually, fuck it, Achelia is the best, so she won't be fighting little people, she will be fighting big people. The biggest, in fact, the scariest and most successful gladiators in Capua. And not only will she fight them, but she will defeat them by sodomizing them with a sword, because Achelia is the best, fuck you. In a move that serves as the mentally impaired mirror image of Blood and Sand, at the start of episode 6, the Dominus now has the best gladiator in Capua.
I'm the best around. That is better hammer, the best around.
All of Capua appears to be fully on board with Achelia the Awesome, because where once they were blinded by bigotry, their eyes have now been opened as to how awesome women are. The exceptions to this are Caesar, who has now left Capua to go and do some other bullshit elsewhere, Cornelia, who has remained in Capua for reasons that I will go into later, and Cassutia, because her entire purpose is to despise Ashur regardless of what he does. A barely conscious Achelia is returned to the Ludus, and her hand is stitched back together. Interspersed throughout the episode, we get flashbacks informing us of Achelia's backstory before she wakes up at the end of the episode, which is to say that, once again, we learn basically nothing about Achelia's backstory. We see the girl whom we have seen twice before shouting for help. The girl is being dragged away against her will by men with spears, whilst Achelia is being prevented from going after her. There is fighting going on in the village as it burns, and Achelia's hand is injured, leading to the scars that we saw in episode 2. Achelia then picks up a spear and kills her enemies. The girl manages to partially break free. Achelia then hurls the spear at the man who is kidnapping this girl. And I don't know why Achelia didn't see this coming, but the guy grabs the girl, which means they're now standing next to each other again, and the spear goes through both of them. This means Achelia accidentally killed the person she was trying to save in the most spectacular and hilarious fashion. We don't learn who this girl was, who was trying to abduct her, or why, or what connection Achelia had with this girl. The only new piece of information we get is that Achelia killed the person she was trying to save because she decided to throw a fucking spear at her.
Dumb bitch.
Why would you ever do that? Spears can be used in melee. You just need to run up to them and choreograph them to death like you usually do. The other revelation here is that Achillea was already trained to fight with a spear, which is another reason why she should have been trained as a Hoplomachus instead of a Dimachorus, but fuck it, we're way past that now. That's all we get. Achillea is still a mystery, but she is now a mysterious idiot. Anyway, the Medicus tells Ashur that Achillea's injured hand must be removed before it becomes infected, and Ashur takes the opportunity to pump out a fat load of nostalgia all over our ears by reminding us of things that happened in the original show. This is partially justified because he is trying to call out the Medicus by saying, well, other people survived similar injuries, so do your fucking job. But even so, this is excessive and is not a one-to-one comparison with Achillea.
Do I not possess fucking leg after grievous wound inflicted by the fucking gold Crixus in the arena? The Medicus of Badiatus restored limb, and here I stand.
Yes, Ashur, those were indeed things that happened. Thank you for the needlessly detailed reminder of a much better show. But had you watched that much better show, you would know, Ashur, that your leg injury sustained in the primus of the opening games of the Arena of Capua at the hands of Crixus the Undefeated Gaul took about 5 years to recover from.
Oh man, I hope Achillea pulls through. The success of the House of Ashur depends on her swift return to the arena.
I'm sorry, Dominus. We need to amputate her hand.
What? No, you fucking fool. Just do the thing where you strap it up and wait for half a decade, and that hand will be good as gold.
Even if that was how medicine worked, didn't you literally just say that you need her to recover, like, right the fuck now?
Hey, Medicus.
Yes?
I am going to kill you now for absolutely no reason.
Yeah, regrettably that was not a part of the skit. That actually happens.
It's simple. We, kill
Medicus.
Because when your champion, to whom you have singularly tied all of your hopes and dreams, is severely wounded, naturally the best course of action is to take the one man in the Ludus capable of saving her life and throw him off the fucking cliff. But, as we will see, this has to happen in order to get us to the payoff at the end of the episode. So, having now killed his Medicus, Ashur realizes he needs a new Medicus, and he asks Chorus to ask Opita if they can borrow his. So, Chorus visits Opita and makes his humble request. Opita agrees immediately because, as he explains, he no longer has need for his own Medicus because he is leaving Capua. This is as a result of the pirate plan in episode 4. Opita was a naive idiot and helped Caesar almost kill Cassutia, almost kidnap Viridia, and successfully kill the Aedile's wife. And because he expressed his unhappiness with how Caesar's insane plan involving secret murder pirates devolved into violence in the streets of Capua, he has now pissed off Caesar and is worried for his own safety. Opita invites Chorus to come with him to Sicilia, but Chorus regrettably accepts that the two of them cannot be together because he cannot leave his duties. This is strange, because it is fine for him to prioritize the investment he has in Ash's gladiators over his desire to wear Opita like a finger puppet, but then why did he ever agree to this deal? There is nothing stopping him from leaving Ash's Ludus to be with Opita other than his sense of honor and duty, neither of which seemed to be too much of a problem in episode 3, but anyway. Chorus returns to Ashur and confronts him about the pirate attack because he now believes that Ashur conspired with Caesar for his own ends. Ashur tells him the truth, and this means that the plan is out in the open. Everyone now knows everything. And whilst Chorus is still not happy that Ashur concealed this information from him, they are both on the same page regarding Caesar. He then reveals to Ashur that Opita is fleeing Capua because he is afraid of what Caesar might do to him or use him for in future. Because Achillea is out of action, Ashur decides that he needs a temporary champion to stand in her place, and so Chorus arranges another contest. Cornelia watches from the balcony, accompanied by Cassutia and Viridia, whom she has invited to the villa, and she proposes a different contest, one of a more penile nature. Tarchon, Erato, and Ephesius are brought into the villa, and they are immediately commanded to get their little fellas out. Cornelia grades their homework, and then decides to place Ashur alongside his men. She does this because she wants to humiliate him in front of Viridia, and this builds off of what happened in episode 5. Cornelia and Caesar spoke of pairing her with a potential husband, a friend of Caesar's I am going to refer to as Skittles, whilst she was clearly more interested in Ashur, and because they want Viridia to marry Skittles for political reasons, they need to make Ashur look like a clown so that he loses any worth he has. The way marriages work in the show is that the woman does not get to choose who she marries, and she is given to a man deemed worthy by her family. Which means, given that Ashur has gradually been earning the favor of Gabinius, Viridia's father, it is not entirely outside of the realm of possibility that Gabinius could give his approval for Viridia to marry Ashur, and so Cornelia wishes to ensure that this never happens. Ashur realizes that he has no choice but to obey Cornelia, given the respect her name demands and given her political connections, and he removes his clothes. Cornelia tells him that his willy isn't big enough, and he is then dismissed. Viridia decides to leave because this has all made her very uncomfortable. She is told that she can wait in Cornelia's bedchambers, but she instead heads to Ashur's office for a chat. This means that Kasutia is apparently okay with her daughter, who was almost kidnapped a couple of weeks ago, wandering off in the villa belonging to a man she despises. Later in the episode, Viridia ends up in the Ludus below, which is extremely dangerous for obvious reasons, which means both Kasutia and Ashur and apparently the writers have forgotten how vulnerable Viridia is, and that absolutely under no circumstances would they ever allow a young Roman noblewoman into the Ludus unless they absolutely have to for some reason, and unless she is accompanied by more than a handful of guards. I'll get to Viridia's bit later. For now, let's stick with the penis party. Cornelia decides to have some fun, and she instructs Tarchon, Erato, and Ephesius to engorge. And they do, with great gusto. There isn't any particular reason for this. She isn't going to pork one of them or make them all pork each other. She just wants them to stand there jacking off while she has a chat with Kasutia. Everything Cornelia does in this episode is with the goal of furthering herself and her husband politically. This is why she humiliates Ashur, and this is why she invited Kasutia for a chat. She wants to sway Kasutia to her side, as each of their husbands are aligned to Crassus and Pompey, who are enemies. If Kasutia and Gabinius can both be brought over to Team Crassus, Caesar and Cornelia will benefit. Cornelia broaches the topic of marrying Viridia to Skittles, but Kasutia thinks this will never happen because her husband is firmly loyal to Pompey, and so he will not wed his daughter to a political enemy. Cornelia is like, oh, well, that's a shame, and then she decides to give her a good old finger blast. And this is the last time we see Kasutia in this episode, which means we will have to wait and see if this blasting served as a convincing argument. Anyway, Viridia has a chat with Ashur, and she's like, oh wow, that was mean, I can't believe they made you do that. And Ashur is like, oh hey, fancy seeing you here, oh object of my desire, and I'm sorry, I don't fucking care if these two hook up. Everything about the acting, writing, music, cinematography, and editing is designed to convey that these two are star-crossed lovers tragically unable to be together, and everything about this feels farcical. In every scene, Viridia is fully lit as if to suggest that she is an angelic being of pure goodness, a beacon of light in the oppressively violent Roman Empire. We have not been given a reason to care because Viridia is little more than a plot device that functions as the object of Ashur's desires. She doesn't really have a personality, she just shows up every now and then looking like a fucking Christmas tree, swoons at Ashur a whole bunch, and he's like, oh, isn't she lovely? Anyway, she tells Ashur that Cornelia was wrong about the size of his penis and says that she wants to see him and his penis again. Upon her request to see Aquileia up close, Ashur brings Viridia into the Ludus, and this woman, who a couple of weeks ago was so traumatized by her husband being killed by gladiators that she was unable to leave her house, is now just casually walking around surrounded by gladiators. Shit. After visiting Aquileia, Viridia talks about her dead husband and says that she no longer grieves the loss of her husband, but the loss of her own autonomy.
Perhaps this world offers more than husband and promise of children. A villa filled with pretty, empty things. I among them.
Although she says that her husband was a good man, this was an arranged marriage and she did not have a choice. She says that she put her husband first and devoted her life to him without consideration for herself. And it now appears that Ashur has inspired a rebellious feminist streak in Viridia by presenting a woman in the arena. Achelia showed her what women are truly capable of and demonstrated that everything she was taught about the proper place for women in the Republic is bullshit. This is quite an amusing idea that I don't think will be followed up on. The idea that Ashur wants to marry Viridia and start a family, but then he accidentally sabotages himself again by inadvertently turning Viridia into a 21st century strong independent feminist who don't need no man. I don't think they will do this, but the thought nonetheless occurred. Now, bear with me here, because trying to get my head around how retarded this is genuinely giving me a headache. Viridia idolizes Achelia. Viridia is very fond of Ashur. Achelia is Ashur's slave who is on death's door because Ashur forced her to participate in a fight to the death. Viridia idolizes Achelia. She likes Ashur. Ashur enslaved Achelia. Achelia is awesome. Ashur is pretty cool. Ashur is the reason why Achelia is nearly dead.
By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I've got nothing. The show is trying to do two things at once that do not work in conjunction. You can't give Viridia this empowered modern feminist streak of, wow, women are awesome and Achelia just proved it, whilst also having her show genuine affection towards the man who bought a woman and forced her to participate in gladiatorial combat. Viridia is not operating under the belief structure of the setting. She is breaking from the norm and espousing modern values, which is fine, but you can't then expect me to believe that she accepts that Achelia is Ashur's slave because that's just how it is. She should be conflicted as to how a man as adorable as Ashur could possibly be okay with throwing such a heroic, brave, noble, strong, and brown woman as Achelia into the arena to be mutilated for his own benefit. The idea of injecting modern politics into an ancient story by playing with ideologies, traditions, and cultural norms is totally fine as a concept. Ideas such as personal autonomy and human rights are relatively modern concepts that were absolutely not commonplace during the time period the show takes place in, hence the proliferation of slavery, blood sports, and the upper class abusing those beneath them without consequence. The original show challenged this. Spartacus was the fish out of water who found himself in the Roman system, and although he initially objected to this system for personal reasons, he gradually realized that everyone deserves to be born free, to live free, and to die free. Spartacus's ideology was that slavery is inherently wrong, and Spartacus was the anomaly. What we appear to be doing now in House of Ashur is a variation on the same idea. Ashur himself doesn't care at all about women's rights, bodily autonomy, independence, or any of that good stuff, but he appears to be inadvertently prompting these thoughts in others.
Got women talking back.
Ashur is not trying to be a feminist by profiting from Achelia's success. If anything, he is cynically planning to monetize the public's newfound obsession with this feminist icon. However, he does appear to approve of Viridia's enlightenment. What I don't know yet is if this idea is going to spread. As in the original show, Spartacus gained followers and convinced them that Roman oppression was morally wrong. Or if this is a one-time deal where Viridia specifically was inspired by Achelia to reject tradition, stick it to the man, free the boob, and do whatever she wants without consequence. We see elsewhere in the episode that basically all of Capua is like, woo, Achelia is the most awesome thing I've ever seen, so I must assume that other people share Viridia's revelation. And this would be a natural follow-up to Ashur breaking from tradition by placing Achelia in the arena to begin with. For now, we must park this thought, but I would not be surprised at this point if Ashur has inadvertently started a feminist uprising in Capua.
How exciting.
Later that evening, Chorus visits Opita again and thanks him for loaning out his medicus, and he tells Opita that he has decided to leave Ashur and accompany him to Sicilia. However, because Chorus is one of the few characters in this show to not sporadically suffer from brain damage, he knows he needs to be careful in how he deals with Ashur. He is worried about what Ashur may do if he leaves, because he knows that Ashur is retarded and might flip the fuck out and start killing people for no reason again. Specifically, Chorus is worried that Opita's life may be endangered, and witnessing Ashur kill his best gladiator and his medicus for absolutely no reason supports this concern. This means, rather confusingly, that the show is acknowledging that what Ashur did was beyond insane. The dialogue here addresses that Ashur killed a man for no reason when he didn't have many gladiators to begin with, which means this is no longer a case of Ashur being poorly written and acting like a crazy person because the writers didn't realize that their protagonist was acting like a crazy person. This is now a case of Ashur being canonically and intentionally a maniac with zero impulse control, which frequently leads to him acting directly against his own desires. This means the character is impossible to take seriously because, yes, he could strike against Opita as Chorus fears, or he could decide to assassinate Gabinius because he looked at him funny that one time. He could promote Hilara to be his new doctore because why not? Ashur is crazy and irrational. Or he could decide that he no longer wants to be a Lanista and open up a restaurant with his gladiators. So Opita then has an idea. He needs to make Ashur an offer that he can't refuse in exchange for Chorus, and the following morning they present their offer to Ashur. Before I get to that, Ashur is extremely pissed off that Chorus intends to leave him, which means what I feared in episode 3 has in fact come to pass. Ashur put Chorus through a test of loyalty, and the conclusion of this test was that Chorus didn't actually prove anything, and episode 6 has now revealed that Ashur thought that Chorus was firmly on his side when he had zero reason to believe such a thing. Anyway, because Opita is an idiot, he decides to offer Ashur his villa, his ludus, and all of his gladiators. He makes this offer not in exchange for Chorus, because Chorus is a free man and he can do what he likes. This offer is specifically made in exchange for Ashur promising not to move against them after the fact. Opita owns many gladiators and slaves, as well as the ludus itself, none of which are coming with him to Sicilia. And I can't calculate their combined value based off information given in the show, but let's just say it is a fucking lot. At least doubling the total value of Ashur's assets overnight. This requires that both men think that Ashur is an insane murderer who has the resources to assassinate people hundreds of miles away, and the desire to do such a thing when this will quite literally not benefit him at all. And it requires that they believe Ashur to be insane to this degree, but simultaneously they are willing to accept his word that he will not move against them. The easy way out was for Chorus to simply say to Ashur, "Sorry buddy, here's my letter of resignation, goodbye." He doesn't need to explain his intentions, nor did he need to explain Opita's intentions earlier, but as we will see later, this was all necessary for the plot to happen. Cornelia then tells Ashur that she has arranged a meeting between him and Gabinius, and she wishes for him to convince Gabinius to give his blessing for Viridia to marry Skittles. This is either a four-dimensional chess move by Cornelia, or this is bad writing. The episode does not clarify which, because Cornelia must know that Ashur and Viridia have the hots for each other, because they don't exactly hide it. And this was presumably why Cornelia invited Viridia to the villa to begin with. So this either means that Cornelia is sending Ashur to convince Gabinius to do something that she knows he doesn't want to do in order to see what happens, or Cornelia truly believes that Ashur will convince Gabinius to wed his daughter to Skittles, which is incoherent because she must know that Ashur would not do this. So, Ashur meets with Gabinius, but instead of recommending that Viridia marry Skittles, he strongly advises against such a thing, because, of course, he wants Viridia for himself. Ashur tells Gabinius that Viridia has made an impression on him, and that he doesn't want her to be used as a chess piece. Gabinius agrees, and he says that he will not consent to the union. After he leaves Gabinius' villa, Ashur is accosted in the streets by a horde of fans who are obsessed with Achillia because they now understand how awesome she is. Proculus just so happens to be within earshot. This is really fucking important. He's just here now, and I don't know why, he just is. And he and Ashur have a little chat. Proculus recognizes that Ashur's unusual offering thoroughly entertained the crowd, and he proposes that they team up by pairing Achillia against Proculus's lesser men, so as to prolong her life and ensure that she keeps winning, which means they can both get rich from the spectacle of a woman defeating men. In this scene, the writers come so fucking close to acknowledging that Achillia's victory was bullshit of the highest order, because Proculus is of the reasonable belief that Aquileia will not stand a chance against actual gladiators, and she only defeated Ammonius because the writers wanted her to. But Proculus seems to hold this belief because Aquileia was badly injured and so will not last in any future games, not because she is a woman who bullshitted her way into becoming champion. Ashur refuses this offer because he hates Proculus, he believes Proculus tried to kill Chorus, and because he believes Aquileia is the best. Proculus presses him and asks why he is so bold given the current state of his champion. And Ashur tells him that Opiter is leaving Capua and giving all of his holdings to him.
What the fuck are you doing?
Why did you just tell him that? Fuck me, this is so bad. Ashur believes that Proculus is untrustworthy, ruthless, vengeful, and murderous. A man who will hire mercenaries to shank his enemies in dark alleyways. And Ashur has just told this man for, I can't stress this enough, absolutely no reason, that Opiter is giving him his entire business for free. Whenever you are watching a bad TV show and a character does something monumentally stupid, it is a pretty safe bet that this is going to lead to something critically important, which then becomes an inescapable loop of terrible, because the more important the payoff is, the more impactful the bad setup is. So, later that evening, Opiter finds that his slaves have been massacred.
Oh my god!
The brothers Ferox have snuck into his villa like a trio of sneaky murder goblins in a scene that is unintentionally very funny, because this shit plays like an episode of Scooby-fucking-Doo.
Someone has a secret. Someone thought he could leave absent farewell. Presenting gifts of villa.
What is happening?
I forgot myself. We will help you remember. Now.
I can't watch anymore.
Also, I guess this means they got past all the guards, because Opiter is apparently wealthy to the point where he can just pack up and leave his job to retire in Sicilia, whilst giving away all of his assets literally for free. So one would think that the man has a sufficient number of guards to protect his business from 3 angry hobbits. And no, this is not comparable to Barca massacring the House of Ovidius in Blood and Sand, because Ovidius was a grain merchant, not a Lannister, and we had no reason to believe that he was particularly wealthy, which is not the case for Opiter. Additionally, I have a much easier time believing that Barca could kill a few guards and then torch the place than the brothers Ferox, because they are the size of children, and, well, the reason we don't actually see them killing anyone is because that would look ridiculous. So, are we to believe that they fought their way in through however many guards Opiter has, or are we to believe that they used little people magic and snuck in through the air ducts, thus catching everyone by surprise?
I have no fucking idea.
I regrettably don't have an answer, but either way, Opiter pleads for his life, but is then mercilessly stabbed to death. The final scene of the episode is Chorus leaving the House of Ashur, tragically unaware of the mess he will find when he arrives at the house of Opiter. This is a terribly executed payoff. For us to hit this payoff, information needs to be passed via multiple characters, and for this to be a functional payoff, this information needs to be passed in a coherent manner that does not involve characters saying things purely to make the plot happen. So, from the top, Chorus needs to learn that Opiter is leaving Capua. This is accomplished by having Opiter straight up tell him, which makes sense because the two are relatively close, and Opiter wants Chorus to come with him. Ashur then needs to learn that Opiter is leaving Capua. This is accomplished by having Chorus explain this to him. Ashur asks what part Opiter played in Caesar's pirate plan, which makes sense, and Chorus explains what Opiter did, which also makes sense, but then he continues that Opiter is now afraid for his life and so is fleeing to Sicilia. There isn't any particular reason for Chorus to reveal this, and the reason for him to conceal this information is that he does not trust Ashur. Revealing Opiter's intentions to Ashur does not serve a purpose, so at best this is a slip-up, at worst this is Chorus acting against his own interests. And finally, Proculus needs to learn that Opiter is leaving Capua and intends to give his ludus to Ashur. This is accomplished by having Ashur and Proculus randomly cross paths in the streets of Capua, and by having Ashur boast that Opiter is giving him a load of free shit for no reason. which he has zero reason to do because Proculus is both his enemy and Opita's enemy, which means Ashur temporarily suffers from amnesia and trusts that Proculus will do precisely nothing with this information. This is broken in a way that the pirate attack was not, because although that was convenience upon convenience, the characters involved did have valid reasons to take the actions they took apart from Opita, whilst conversely Opita's death relies entirely upon multiple characters doing things that they have zero reason to do.
This episode was badly written!
Honestly, at this point, I am beyond done with this show. I have completely lost hope that it will improve because the writers are now delivering significant payoffs and they are almost entirely non-functional. I actually feel more pissed off with House of Ashur than had the show been terrible the whole way through, because then I could just laugh at it and move on. But I still maintain that there were elements in the first 2 episodes that had potential. I was open to accepting the story that the writers apparently wanted to tell. I was defending certain unpopular narrative decisions, and I was fully willing to grant the show the benefit of the doubt rather than writing it off based on the awful trailer. Now I feel like a fool for having hope because the last 4 episodes have revealed that this was false hope. It could have been good, or at the very least okay, but instead the show varies between occasionally substantive character work, silly brain-dead entertainment, and straight-up terrible plotting. I don't think that the show is bad because it is woke, because I think that is a different argument, and I don't care about making that argument, but many people understandably concluded that the show was going to be woke DEI nonsense based on the trailer. I maintain that it is distracting, reductive, and unsubstantive to just be like, ew, that looks woke, and then not give it a chance. And because I am interested in analyzing why something does, or in this case does not work, I reject the paradigm of, oh, let's work out if this piece of media aligns with my political beliefs so that I can decide if it's good or not. I firmly believe that it is obvious that many people were unfairly critical of the opening couple of episodes for entirely political reasons, and I think that although this extreme negative reaction was understandable given the trailer, it was nonetheless unfair. However, in this instance, those of you who jumped the gun and came to such a conclusion based on the trailer turned out to be absolutely correct. I do not think that it is healthy to jump to such conclusions because it is always better to assess something on its own merits, but, and I hate that this is the case, House of Ashur turned out to be exactly the show some of you thought it would be. But anyway, that brings us to the end of the video. If you are enjoying watching my, at this point it's really a descent into madness, please let me know in the comments and drop me a like. In the video description, you will find a link to my second channel where I upload various bits of extra content, including video game streams and the music I make for these videos. You will also find links to my community Discord server and my Patreon. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next video.